I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone.
Everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. I am here with my co-host Teresa Kenny, and I'm also here with Dr. Sarah Pederson. So Sarah Pederson is the founder of Vera Health and Fertility, and her passion is how do we really work with the woman to get to wholeness and wellness using things from God's green earth, nutrition. How do we eat well to restore our health, to restore our fertility? And I'm excited for this interview, Dr. Sarah and Teresa, because Dr. Sarah is an OBGYN. And so, of course, she has surgical applications. She understands all of the OBGYN world. But what I love so much about you, Dr. Sarah, and what I'm looking forward to learning more is just how you approach your patients, again, with this viewpoint of holistic healthcare to really help them to restore, again, these issues that may be causing infertility or hormone imbalances. So we just want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're so excited. Okay, so Dr. Sarah, we're just going to jump right into it. When you're meeting with your female patients, what is like the top 3 things that you notice right away that need restored?
I think when we're feeling bad or we're struggling with fertility, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of things on TikTok and Instagram, and people will tell you things, and it's really easy it's very easy to get lost and difficult to know what's real and what's not. So it's important to start with the basics and the core. What are you eating? How much protein are you getting? How are you moving your body? What is your hormone profile? What does your glucose do when you eat certain foods? And really digging to the bottom of what people are doing. What does their day-to-day look like? How's their mental health? Those, even just seemingly basic things, are essential to getting them healing and feeling great.
So, Dr. Sarah, you're an OBGYN, which is amazing that you actually care about all of those things. So I think that in traditional medicine, oftentimes the appearance is that they're only looking for what they can find either in a blood test or an ultrasound or a diagnostic procedure. And it can be forgotten how important these things are, like stress, like gut health, like how much exercise is the right amount of exercise, especially when it comes to fertility. And since 1 in 6 couples now struggles with infertility, I'm assuming that your practice is not shy of patients. This is not something that, is getting smaller in our population. This is an increasing problem, and an increasing problem with just hormone imbalances in general. So how did you get to the point where you realized that as an OBGYN, this was much more than just what you can find in those tests? And why is it so important to think about these lifestyle things in relationship to success when it comes to fertility issues?
When you're in medical training, it's very focused, especially as an OBGYN, on medicine and surgery. And I always just felt that we weren't serving women well. There should be more out there. And a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, oh, I went to all these doctors and they said my hormones are normal. And it's really important to check your hormones at certain days of your cycle because our hormones flow and things like that. Or we didn't check a full thyroid panel, or they didn't check adrenal glands. There's just a lot that involves hormones, your entire endocrine system, things like that. And then a lot of times people also, they just don't understand or realize that what they're eating, what they're putting into their body has such a massive, massive impact on their hormones. And sometimes it's just basic fixes, and those fixes can really change someone's hormone profile in a way where they feel great, they get their energy back, they're not feeling depressed or anxious or having mood changes, and they're able to get pregnant. Yes, sometimes we have to do endometriosis surgery or we have to give medications, but the core, no matter what, is to start with a foundation of what you're eating and is that the right thing for your body.
A few months ago, no, maybe last year, I think, Teresa and we did an episode on ultra-processed foods, and it was one of our more popular episodes. And when I was reading that book, by the way, if you haven't read it, it's awesome because it reads so easy. I mean, you're reading it and this guy's funny. He gives you a ton of history, kind of how do we get here, in terms of what we're putting in our mouth, as opposed to growing up on the farm and, having cattle and having a garden and eating whole from the earth, But it was so interesting because is it any wonder that our body responds to food that isn't actual food? It's more dead than alive, and it might not have ever been alive. The saying, eat food that was once alive, whether it was from a plant or an animal, I think that's always a really good tip. So, Dr. Sarah, I'm going to ask you to put a percentage, but it's okay if you don't get the percentage right. Just from your viewpoint, what percentage of the women that you're working with, their problems, what percentage do you see that or potentially would guess comes from them just not eating correct, like not eating nutrient-dense foods?
Probably about 90%.
Okay.
The biggest things that I see are, one is that a lot of women aren't eating enough protein.
Mm-hmm.
You really want to make sure, and it's a bit body specific, of course, but in general, we want to be getting 60 to 80 grams of protein a day. 2, we need to be eating breakfast. It's mandatory that you eat breakfast. You have to start your day with eating protein. Because of the fad of intermittent fasting, a lot of people will skip breakfast, but that actually puts your body into a state of stress and fight or flight. And if your body's in a state of stress, it's not going to be making hormones properly, because in order to make hormones, your body needs to feel safe and nourished. And then 3, we are very addicted to sugar. And we like to substitute sugar for fake sugar, like monk fruit and stevia and maltitol and erythritol. And people are always shocked and they say, oh my gosh, you're not going to let me eat monk fruit and stevia? I thought those things were natural. But the problem with those is that they truly are artificial sweeteners, right? They're not sucrose, fructose, or glucose. And they are 1,000 times sweeter than regular sugar. So now we're tricking our body into thinking it's getting something sweet. We're still spiking our dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin levels, and we're not even eating actual sugar, because at least our body knows how to process sugar. So we tend to just substitute one bad thing for the other, right? Instead of putting honey in our coffee, we'll put candy cane flavored protein powder with monk fruit. So I think that's a big thing. It's not that you can never have sugar. It's helpful to have sugar because it makes us happy and brings us joy. And it's just that you don't want to be having it every single day because it is inflammatory for your body. So those are the big things that I really try to guide people on is what's their sugar content? What are they eating? What brands? How much protein? Are they having breakfast? Are they eating and then drinking their coffee? That type of thing.
And Dr. Sarah, I would assume you would agree that some of this is also individualized. Like not everybody responds the same way in the same way in terms of blood sugar to any sort of a glucose load, whatever it is. So how for you, and I'll just say like I had worn a continuous glucose monitor for about 2 weeks in the last month here or so, just to see out of interest kind of what would be happening. And I noticed that the 2 times my blood sugar spiked the most was right before I was going to give a talk. So that was a cortisol-driven response. And then the second time was actually eating Ruffles potato chips, which isn't technically a sugar. And that's what's interesting is, it's more of a potato, right? But that's a pretty good carb load. And you hear this often, people will talk about blood sugar monitoring and what triggers their sugars, maybe something like a straight up just starch, rice, potatoes, even sweet potatoes. But I think the idea of a continuous glucose monitor for patients who kind of don't know really what is best for their individual body, because we are all different. How do you implement that, or do you implement that in practice with your patients just to kind of give them a guide and a roadmap to really figuring this out?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I have almost all my patients wear a CGM because, to your point, it's extremely personalized. Some people can eat one sweet potato and it really spikes their blood sugar. Some people can eat all the sweet potatoes in the world and it doesn't spike your blood sugar at all. Also, it's helpful to know what your own fasting windows need to be and how to exercise. For example, when you exercise, you want your blood sugar to be a straight line, really flat. Sometimes people are exercising and their blood sugar is actually going up because their liver is now having to make extra sugar because they actually don't have enough nutrients to fuel that workout. Or their blood sugar's going down, they're burning through all their sugar, and then they feel kind of hangry at the end of a workout, like they really need to eat something. So it's important to have that data so you can know how much protein do you need to eat before you work out, how much carbohydrates, and then how often do you need to eat. Like I just had a patient the other day whose blood glucose is really low, and she has to literally eat every 2 hours. And I said, you are a person that needs to eat every 2 hours. And she said, oh my gosh, everyone makes fun of me because I have to eat all the time. My husband's always making fun of me because I have to bring all these beef sticks when I work out. And I said, you know what? That's your body. That's how you learn how to nourish your own body. I had a patient, for example, who was vegan. And when you're vegan, sometimes you eat a lot of soy. And she was eating a lot of just white, processed and refined carbohydrates. And her estrogen was really, really high. And she had been to all these different doctors, failed IVF. She kind of came to me as a last resort, and I had her do a glucose monitor, and her blood sugar was really high. Because even when you're vegan, you can tend to eat a lot of processed food that is dairy and meat-free. And she said, Sarah, I don't believe you. I don't think that changing my diet's going to bring my estrogen down. I said, okay, just try it. So I had her eat way more protein and just more whole food, lots more vegetables, things that weren't so much soy, so many phytoestrogens processed or packaged. In 1 month, her estrogen profile was completely fixed. And in 2 months, she was pregnant. Literally just with eating. We didn't even have to give her any medication. But sometimes having the data and knowing what's good for your body or not is extremely powerful.
Mm. What do you think the danger is, Dr. Sarah, in kind of assuming there's a one-size-fits-all to food? So, Teresa, like you mentioned, with you, your Ruffles potato chips, spiked your blood sugar, or even right before you talked, you gave it a talk because of, that kind of a stress response. I've seen people doing coaching and doing other work where they just make rules. You cannot and should not eat this, 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 and this. You cannot and should, or you can and should eat this, that, the other thing. Rules. So besides CGM, so let's say someone can't do it or won't do it, can't afford it, whatever. What are some other clues that might help give women information about what foods may be good for them and what foods may not be so good for them?
I love that. And I do have people almost run little experiments on themselves. For example, women do not do well with keto and paleo usually because we actually need carbohydrates. We need the B vitamin 6, we need the vitamin B7, which is in long and whole grains. It's hard to get a full complement of B vitamins and fiber if we're not eating any carbohydrates. And some women need more and less carbohydrates. So for example, I always recommend that you start your morning with about 20 grams of protein. And sometimes people just have way too much sugar in the morning, right? They're putting honey in their tea or their coffee and sweetener, or they're putting honey on their yogurt. They're putting a lot of granola, which can have a lot of carbs, a lot of berries, things like that. But usually what I'll have people do is start with a paleo breakfast. But sometimes when you eat a paleo breakfast, you'll feel amazing and energized. And the goal in most people is that you have a 3 to 4 hour fasting window until you have to eat lunch again. But some people, if they have a paleo breakfast, they're hangry in an hour, and that just doesn't work for them. So then I say, okay, well, that means you need to add some carbohydrates back. Like, let's do a half a piece or a full piece of toast. So it is totally important to really listen to those cues of your body so you can personalize it to yourself. Like, do you need more protein? Do you need less carbohydrates? Do you need more grains? Do you need more fiber? That kind of thing is really important. So feeling hangry is always a sign that something that we didn't balance your sugar properly in something that you ate for that day.
I'm going to take a break to just talk about our sponsors, Dr. Sarah, and then I'm going to ask you another question. But since you mentioned nutrition and B vitamins, it just always makes me think about the fact that it is really hard to get all of our nutrients from food. And so sometimes adding a good quality supplement can really kind of like fill the need that a patient has on all levels. So we have We Heart Nutrition as our beautiful sponsor for Hormone Genius podcast, and they have really quality supplements. Jamie and I take them. We love them. You can get a discount trying We Heart Nutrition by adding the code GENIUS at checkout. And you can take a quiz and it will tell you exactly what you need based on kind of how you answer that quiz. So I really suggest that. And then we have Wonder Cow, which is colostrum for gut health. And I have just been so impressed with this company, Wonder Cow. They are lovely people, a couple, actually, beautiful family, and they believe so much in the quality of their product because they give it to their own kids. And that's how they really restored their children's health was by using this beautiful colostrum, which is considered like liquid gold. So you can get a discount at Wonder Cow for a variety of their products with the code Hormone Genius. And lastly, Salt and Light by Sammy, toxic-free fragrances, which I know, Dr. Sarah, you would agree that we've got to avoid those endocrine system disruptors because they can also act as a fake kind of hormone, a fake estrogen. And so Salt and Light by Sammy has incredible fragrances. My favorite is Magdalene. And you can get a 10% discount by adding the code Hormone Happy at checkout. And so, Dr. Sarah, I'm going to take this in a different direction because you did mention you had a patient that failed IVF and then ended up in your practice, which is not an uncommon story. And I was reading an article by Natural Womanhood, and it was talking about a recently larger published study in the world of restorative reproductive medicine and naprotechnology showing the success rates for restorative reproductive medicine and in comparison to IVF. One of the things that stuck out to me was one, these patients that go to the REI or traditional kind of reproductive endocrinology, a lot of times they don't even test their luteal progesterone. They're not getting the data about the actual hormones in their menstrual cycle, and then they get a diagnosis of unexplained infertility, which is not a diagnosis, right? Like it's just I just don't know. I mean, there is an explanation for infertility. You just haven't discovered it yet. And also what was brought up in this article was the time it takes sometimes with restorative type of protocols to get to the point a patient becomes pregnant is different. Because to restore the body to natural health and to make the endocrine system do what it is meant to do, which is ovulate and create a conception in a child, can take more time. So give us your kind of ideas around that. Why should a couple that comes to you know that, it may happen quickly, but they also maybe need to have this idea of commitment to restore the body takes more time than just going to a lab and making a baby and doing IVF.
Yeah. And the whole goal, of course, when we're trying to get pregnant is to have a baby. But I think I try to reframe that sometimes to patients is that, yeah, we want to definitely get you pregnant and have a baby. But importantly, you want to make sure that we are doing what your body needs and healing it and that you feel amazing. And a lot of times people don't realize that they're not feeling well until we dig into some of those things. I do a lot of gut health work, for example. And I had a patient who also failed IVF and came to me and she literally only pooped once a week. And she had no idea that that was a red flag for her health. And so I said, oh my gosh, we need to get your gut way better. It turned out that she had multiple gut infections. She wasn't eating enough fiber. So with a combination of fiber and probiotics and prebiotics and treating gut infections, she came to me and she said, Sarah, I am extremely excited. I literally poop every single day. I never have any gut issues. I feel amazing. And then she was able to get pregnant. So sometimes those red flags that we have in our bodies are a sign things that we need to heal. And she had a really healthy pregnancy and she felt really great postpartum. So you're totally right. If we take the time to listen to our bodies and heal them, that it not only helps us with our fertility and our hormone balance, but it gives us a really healthy, strong pregnancy and a healthy postpartum.
Some people may wonder, okay, I'm struggling with infertility or I'm struggling with a hormone imbalance issue. And we started off this interview by you sharing, Dr. Sarah, that your patients come in having watched a TikTok video or something on YouTube, and they're like so confused because it's information overload. But because the world is so noisy and so confusing, I like that you're breaking this down. Like, we want to keep it simple, but it's also important to know what we're working with. It's important to know what we're working with. Because recently, for me personally, I think I'm noticing in my own health personally that I respond to certain vegetables. So I thought, I'm going to really amp up my gut health. I'm going to get as many diverse veggies as possible. So I saw this really cute little nutrition dietitian lady on Instagram, and I followed her like little week plan to increase as many vegetables as possible, okay, in my diet. Foods I don't normally eat all at once. To give you an example. 3 types of beans, like a black bean, a kidney bean, a pinto bean. I put it all in a bowl. And then I put like cilantro and tomatoes and peppers and vinaigrette and olive oil. And I try to get as literally many diverse veggies or plants within a bowl. I didn't just do that one time. I did it twice. 2 different. So now instead of one bowl with like 12 different diverse things, I found a second recipe with 12 other diverse like beans. Teresa's face is like, you're like, she's nodding her head. Like, no, Jamie. Okay, so I jammed it. I was so pumped. I'm like, I'm going to have a really great week. This is going to be awesome. What happened? I didn't expect. So the day after I didn't eat by the way, I ate a normal serving of these things. And I thought, I'll make it for the week, okay? So the next day, I had just eaten like those 2 servings of all these vegetables. My throat, like so much drainage, face pressure, tired, headache. It felt like an allergy, like seasonal allergies. And I thought, oh, I feel bad. I feel so bad. Not thinking it was the food I ate. And then the next day, I ate the same because I'm like, I don't feel good. I really need to eat more diverse veggies. Next day, felt worse because I ate more of it. And then I see a functional physical therapist, and she said, it might be all the vegetables that you just all of a sudden started eating that your body's not used to. She's like, why don't you just not eat that for a little bit and see what happens? So what happens with me, when I start to feel my immune system goes down, I start going gangster on everything that should be healthy for me. But in reality, I was hurting myself because my physical body does not respond well to all of those things. And so I stopped, and sure enough, literally, like the next day or 2, felt totally normal, fine. It went away. Okay, that's a whole story, Dr. Sarah, to say this. What kind of women come into you? Because I would call that like a 2.0 problem. Like a 1.0 problem would be, I'm not eating vegetables. I'm just eating a bunch of ultra processed foods. I'm not getting hydration. I'm not working out, whatever. Okay. But for the women who come to you who are kind of hyper vigilant and they're having these issues, what food sensitivities do you see coming up? Like antihistamine releasing sorts of foods, I think was my issue. Do you see these cases as well? Or again, are you mostly just seeing women who just don't know the basics of nutrition? They need to incorporate that.
Yeah, it's true that food, it can inflame you. And that's also very personal. For example, in some people, gluten is really inflammatory and you want to cut out gluten, but it's not universal. Not everybody should be gluten-free, for example. Some people can eat all the gluten in the world, and that's a great way for them to get fiber. And they feel great when they eat gluten. Dairy is like that too. And vegetables can be like that, especially sometimes cruciferous or raw vegetables. People think, oh, I feel horrible when I eat this, but this is supposed to be good for me. Why am I feeling bad when I'm eating something that's supposed to be good for me? And then we do a lot of MCAS, so mast cell activation and histamine testing to kind of tease out some of that inflammation. For example, in a perfect world, so at our clinic, we do a really advanced food sensitivity testing profile. So it's called MRT. We test for 120 different things. So it has food dye in there and certain types of medicine and all kinds of different food. And then every food has a score. And then we give people a protocol that's called ELITE protocol, where we start with the foods that we know their body can tolerate, that we know they're going to feel good on. And then we introduce the other foods slowly. So it helps really detox all of their receptors, but with the end game of being nourishing and not restrictive. Because sometimes in our world, we just think, okay, I just want to restrict. I don't want to eat processed food. I don't want to have gluten. I don't want to have dairy. And then you're literally eating 5 foods and you're not nourishing your body because you're not getting the diversity necessary to make estrogen. So that can be helpful to go down to the basics and then introduce the food slowly again instead of all at once. And oftentimes we'll have people introduce foods one at a time. If we're not doing a food sensitivity test, then you want to start with the foods that you know you feel good on, and then you introduce other foods one at a time. So a practical way to do that, I tell people every time you go to the grocery store, buy a new seed and buy a new vegetable. It's not that you need to change everything overnight, but if you've never eaten beets before, pop some beets into a salad, pop some pumpkin seeds onto a salad, see how you feel. So that can be a practical way of introducing things slowly where it doesn't feel overwhelming and you have that baseline of foods that you know are going to feel good for your gut.
I think those are really good points. And I actually do something similar in my practice with the food sensitivity testing, and I'm very careful about it. And what I tell patients is it's not like you're allergic to all those foods or somehow you're intolerant to all of them. And honestly, like the more sensitive somebody is to foods, it means that they're more leaky gut. So it's like their body is just, it's an evidence of an overall response in the body of the immune system being overactive because of the fact that the gut is leaking out these proteins that come from food. And many times it's not necessarily exactly, I think, the food aspect. It's more when you reduce the amount of variety and you get a little bit more basic, the gut has time to heal as well, especially if you are particularly reducing things that are triggers to the patient. So I do something very similar. So that's really great information. And that food sensitivity testing is, people have access to that even outside of going to a holistic practitioner. But again, I would caution people, you have to be very careful to get too restrictive and get a little overwhelmed by that. I do want to ask you, Dr. Sarah, just personally yourself. So again, oftentimes, we're asking about how people treat patients, but you're a mom of 4. Obviously, you probably have to juggle a lot. And I'm sure your practice, although it hasn't been 25 years been practicing, I think it's been less than 10. You're building this and it just kind of grows and you become more busy. As a mom of 4, what are the things that you do personally in your life to balance everything? And what have you found even for yourself really works to basically make you feel as whole and energetic as a human being as possible?
The things that really help me are to be really intentional and to have routines and to prep. So, for example, sometimes I'm just seeing patients all day long and I know that I need to pack my lunch every single day with a certain amount of veggies and a certain amount of protein. Otherwise, I'll just see patients and I won't eat. And I really keep my routine stable. Like I wake up in the morning, I eat my eggs and my bacon, then I drink my coffee, and because you always want to eat and then drink coffee. Then I go to work and I have all these snacks at work that I know are not going to spike my blood sugar so I don't have this afternoon crash. And I drink 2 liters of water while I'm at work. So I give myself a little goal. Like I have to drink 1 Stanley in the morning, 1 Stanley in the evening. And then it's really important to me to, like when I go home, to have high quality family time. So when I'm home, I don't have my phone out. That's like my high quality time for my kids. And then I'm really intentional about that because otherwise we could just spend the entire night just cooking and cleaning and getting your kids to bed, and you are with your child, but you never actually spend high quality time with them. So I really parse out an hour every single night where we just play. I ask them what they want to do. They get to pick what we do, that kind of a thing before bed. And that's a time where I don't work. And then usually I'll log on and do patient things after bed. So I think just prepping, having your routines, and just being extremely intentional about where you spend your time, especially with little ones, is super helpful.
So with CGMs, going back to monitoring your blood glucose levels, what would you say is a good first step for these ladies? So for me, I've never used a CGM ever, but I know Teresa just did, and she said she found it very helpful. I think it would be very interesting and very fun to see. But I get a little overwhelmed with all the different options. So what kind of options would you recommend someone considering to start with first? Because I know there's kind of more short-term ones, long-term ones. What would you say?
So you actually can buy your own CGM online. The company called Abbott makes one called Stello, and then the company called Dexcom makes one called Lingo. So you can go online, buy a Lingo, put it on your arm, and the app is really helpful because it gives you a little score. So it starts learning you a little bit and predicting what your blood sugar is going to do and what the score was. And that can be really helpful. But it's extremely powerful to write down what you're eating, and you can do that in the app. And then you have to run experiments on yourself. For example, I have some patients who they eat oatmeal and honey in the morning. It really spikes their blood sugar. And I say, okay, well, the next day, just eat oatmeal with no honey. So you can see, is it the oatmeal or is it the honey? And I have some patients who are like, well, I go out to eat and I have pizza night with my kids every Friday. I'm like, great. We're not going to ruin pizza night with your kids. Let's just see, like, does it spike your blood sugar? Or maybe are you the kind of person who needs to eat a salad? And as long as you have that base, then you can eat pizza and it won't spike your blood sugar. Mm-hmm. So it's helpful to write down what you eat, run experiments on yourself, and then go back and look at the info, because it's easy to wear it and you're like, oh, that was fun, but you didn't actually learn anything from it. So you do have to make sure you go back and see, like, what did spike my blood sugar, and then do something different the next day so you can try to keep it flat.
I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So these CGMs can also manage glucose swings when we're stressed. So I love that you shared, Dr. Sarah, that you create these healthy boundaries. You know, you kind of walked us through your day, but then you go home and it's a reset to your nervous system too. It's shifting you out of work mode into family mode. And that's just a beautiful thing. But in terms of women that you work with who might, again, be more hypervigilant, or they're also managing their CGM, and maybe that's stressing them out. That alone is stressing them out. You know, what would you say to the woman, you know, who gets easily stressed, either by getting all this data or just in general? Would you say, why don't we learn for a month and keep track? Do you get false readings because someone can just be stressed often, so it's really actually hard to understand? Was it food? Was it stress? Let's get clarity there. And I may or may not be asking for myself. I'd be interested. Would be interested to know.
A CGM is not for everybody. I have a good conversation with people before we decide if it's a good idea, because if I usually frame it, for example, like, is data helpful for you? Are you a data person? Do you like data? Or does it really stress you out and overwhelm you? And there are times where you shouldn't do a CGM and times where you should. For example, I almost never do one in the first trimester, because in the first trimester, you don't feel amazing and all you want to do is eat a bunch of cereal, and it's going to spike your blood sugar, and that's going to stress you out. But if all that sounds good as cereal, then you need to be eating cereal. Like, you need to be eating something. Or if you're about to go on a vacation, or if you're just at a really tricky, difficult time in your life, it's not a great time to do a CGM. So you definitely have to know yourself and what's good for you. So if having all that data freaks you out, that might not just be the best care plan for you. And if you're at a stable time in your life where it's going to make sense to look at all that information and be able to do something about it, that's a good time to wear one. But stress also and anxiety, it's kind of like hunger, for example. Like, we can try to, every once in a while, we're going to not have enough food and we're going to get hungry. We just want to prevent ourselves from, like, getting really hangry, where we're irritated and we're yelling at people. And we can, as much as we can try to plan for that. Like, plan our day, plan our trips, plan anything that's going to be disruptive, so that we have, like, high quality food to eat when we're hungry. Stress is similar. Like, sometimes we can plan for those stressors that we have. Like, we know something is stressful. You can do good things to manage your stress, or you can do bad things to manage your stress, where your cortisol is just going through the roof. It's like, when you're hungry, you can eat something good, or you can eat something bad, right? You can go to McDonald's, or you can eat a bowl of yogurt, that kind of a thing. So I try to frame stress as like that. It's like, sometimes you're just literally going to be stressed. Like, the goal is not to not be stressed, because we're all going to be stressed. Like, it doesn't make sense just to be like, oh, don't stress about it. But you literally have to have techniques to bring your stress down and know what those techniques are for your body. So that's where heart rate variability monitoring is kind of like the CGM to stress of eating. Because, your heart rate variability is going to change and you are going to get stressed. But what are you going to do to literally bring it down? Or what are you going to do ahead of time to prevent that cortisol spike from really throwing off your day and your mood?
Really good advice. And I know we're going to get close to the end here, but I think that's really important. Jamie, you bring up a really good point, because I know you are not alone in getting overwhelmed by information. And you talk about that all the time, this idea that almost like we have so much information. And I had a patient just in the last couple of days that I've never seen so much anxiety, almost like, it is a medical anxiety, but we almost need another name for it because it really comes from this social media generation where they can look up any blood test they get. They can look up any diagnosis that they're afraid of. And it is creating another sort of stress. And it is a very particular type of women that's prone to that. So I think we have to identify it. We have to acknowledge it. And I do think that stress is significant to our health, and there has to be kind of an unwinding of that. Or I like the idea of just routine, as you said, as a part of your day. And maybe as a part of your day, the routine is 5 minutes, 10 minutes of complete quiet in prayer, in meditation, in looking at the sunrise in the morning, whatever it is. But it appears that if you don't start your day to make sure that you don't start it under a stressful start, that you're going to, end up kind of spiraling in a sense. So we've really got to have techniques and boundaries and things in place to really address that stress. Jamie's going to be asking, I know, the last question here in a second, but I do want you to have an opportunity, Dr. Sarah, to talk about what your practice is and how it functions, because I know it's a little different than walking into a traditional OBGYN office. And who can see you? Is it patients just in your state? And give us an idea of how it all works.
Yeah, I'm a holistic OBGYN, so I do about 50% fertility and I do 50% women's health. So lots of painful periods, PCOS, hormonal imbalances, PMS, that kind of a thing. And the core that we do is we talk about the 6 pillars of hormone balance. So we really focus on diet, sleep, exercise, stress, weight, and then spirituality and mentality. So we go through all those pillars. And then that is the core. And then on top of that, we do supplements. So maybe we do need to add a supplement for egg quality and that kind of a thing. And then on top of that, we add medication. The whole goal of medication is never to override your body, but to enhance what it's naturally doing or to retrain it and then be able to come off the medication later. Say, for example, sometimes we're really stressed. Your thyroid's getting weaker. We need to start some thyroid medication. We work on your stress. We work on your gut. We come off the thyroid medication. Or maybe our testosterone's really low because we've just burned the candle at both ends for so long. We need to give a little bit of bioidentical testosterone. We tank ourselves back up. We learn how to maintain our testosterone. We come off of it. And then I do surgery. So I do a lot of endometriosis excision surgery. I do platelet-rich plasma injections in ovaries for things like egg quality. So sometimes you need different parts of the ladder, but the core is literally the basics and the 6 pillars. And so that can be helpful anyone who has endometriosis and we're trying to get their inflammation down. If you have PCOS and we need to get your hormones balanced and get your metabolism better. If you're trying to get pregnant, that same approach is really helpful to all different aspects of our women's health.
So good. That's incredible. So I'm going to wrap up here. We're going to ask you the question we ask every person who comes on our show. What do you wish every woman knew about her hormone genius?
I think it's important to know what your hormone profile is. So like Teresa talked about, it's so important to know what your hormones are. Are you a low estrogen person? Are you a low progesterone person? Are you a high testosterone person? Because then you can eat and exercise to your hormone profile. And it's important to know what your cortisol levels are and your blood glucose is so that all of those things working in concert, you know exactly what your body needs and you're empowered with the tools so that if something is off, you know how to fix it or you know how to prevent something from getting off. So knowing your cortisol, your insulin, blood sugar, and hormone profile is extremely powerful in knowing what it takes to heal yourself and feel great every single day.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Sarah. This has been awesome. Such great practical information for everyone's health. How can people stay in touch with you? What is your website, social media, anything else that you want to give in terms of details of people staying in touch with you?
Yeah, thanks so much. Our website is verafertility.com and our Instagram handle is @verafertility. And then I also have a podcast called The Hormone Cafe if you want to learn more about some of those specifics we talked about today.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Maybe we'll have you back in the future and we can continue our conversation. Have a blessed day.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel. So if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.